good half an hour to get to the points where we really want to talk with people about. Because we go deep, like, and it's hard to like go into mommy daddy issues after 5 minutes. So you gotta warm people up, and then you can go into more intimate stuff.
Okay. Well, I will learn from you.
I don't know about that. Uh,
Okay. Let me see if we are live. Okay. Yeah. We are very live, and it's 4 o'clock.
yeah,
So
three my time.
so this is a very good time to start, which is on time.
Yes.
So hi, Andy. Andy Chaleff.
Hello.
I've never met you before, so it's a great privilege to interview you. I have no idea
You
what we'll
too.
talk about, but we have somewhere to start. But before we do that, we are going to hear the jingle of the show.
Please.
Okay,
Want to talk with people about. Oh.
hold on a second. And we're off.
I
High
don't
as a
know.
kite. Ah,
I don't hear
okay, so
anything.
that's
Just
I have to do it again now.
yes. Now I hear something.
Oh, because we have a monster living next door, so I put my earphones on. And I forgot you can't hear.
Oh, sweep you off your feet. We move, we groove, you got Mel. Ease your legs, rest a while. All you gotta do is smile. We're swell, can't you tell? You got Mel. When the show begins, you better hold on to tight. Or before you know it, you'll be high as a kite. Take a break, settle down. We're the only show in town. It's our road, don't you know? You got Mel. Give it up, don't think twice. We're a hurricane on ice. What the hell? Give it yell, ring your bell, show and tell. Mademoiselle, give a smell. You got Mel. You got Mel.
Now, it's completely kosher to start.
I was going to say that probably anyone under this certain age won't know your reference to You Got Mel.
It's funny, right?
It's like anyone over maybe 30 plus, they're like, oh, we know the reference. But everyone else is like, what is, just a nice little, like, way to end your song.
Like this thing that I'm holding, right?
Yeah, exactly. How does that exist?
Yeah, but if people under 30 are watching my show, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is a show for over 30.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So Andy, in order to break the ice, are you a Beatles or a Rolling Stones person?
Ooh, I have to say it depends on the time, but at this time, it's certainly Beatles. I was with my wife, and we were walking around one island of the Netherlands, which I wasn't really all that familiar with. I just discovered the Netherlands has islands after living here for 15 years. And as I'm walking the island, we were there, and I said, babe, we were so isolated that I put on Sonos because Beatles were always so hard to let their music go on any sort of distribution mechanism. So finally they made it onto Sonos, and we basically sang like each ballad as we walked along the beach for hours. It was really really special.
So what ballad comes to mind right now?
Oh, A Day in the Life. That song takes me in 5 different. I don't know if that's the name of the song itself, but that song is masterful.
Well, why don't you start singing it for us, and we'll tell you. If it's
I can't remember let me think. Woke up, got out of bed, dragged the comb across my head. On the day way downstairs, I had a smoke. Suddenly spoke, and I fell into a dream. And then it just like, what the hell? I mean, those guys, at that time, if you think about what was going on in music, and then they were just pulling in the influences. If you look at it contextually, they were traveling to India, or they were just like sort of stealing instruments and stuff. But my God, like the death. They talk about death a lot in their music, and in a way that it's done in this effortless, beautiful, like I don't know. Yes, it brings a smile to my face just to think of them.
A Day in the Life is widely considered their best song. And you sang the middle part, the Paul McCartney part. It starts with the John part. You know, I heard the news today.
Oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grave. Yeah. And though the news was rather sad. What was the next line? I don't even remember it. But yeah, I couldn't help but laugh.
I had to laugh.
Yeah.
I saw the photograph.
Yeah.
It blew his mind out. Well, we're not gonna.
I mean, but listen, I mean, we could spend the whole hour sitting there with how cool would it have been to have sat there and just allowed your mind to play with these lyrics and then come out with something that beautiful. And the non-repetition, the way that the song is 4 different songs like stuck into one, where you don't know even what's going on with you. I mean, that's an incredible song. When by the end of it, you're like, what the fuck did they just do to me? I don't even know what journey I took.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't have that anymore in music because everything has to fill a certain time, a certain, segment. It's just not this eclectic mix of let's mess with people's minds, with it, unless it's techno related. Yeah.
So, Andy, you've lived in the Netherlands for 15 years. Where in the Netherlands?
Amsterdam. I'm in the center of Amsterdam on the 9 streets. I lived up the north, but I'm now moving into this location here. And it's really interesting. The building that I occupy for my business is the first kindergarten in the country. So I have tourists all day just sitting, or used to have, no longer at the moment, but they'll shoot pictures of the building all day long and they'll say, oh, there's the first kindergarten. So I'll hear that through the windows all day while I'm here working. Yeah.
So we're all reformed kindergarten students, aren't we?
Yes, certainly. Trying to find our way back, actually.
I didn't actually know that you spent so much time in Nederland. Ik hou van Nederland.
Oh, mooi.
Speak the Nederland?
Yes. I actually went to Dutch indoctrination school, which you have to do before you get a passport. And I actually studied to get my Dutch passport. And, that became its own drama just because trying to live between America and another country is just nightmarish between the taxes.
So what are you doing in the Netherlands?
And that, I left America at 20. So I've lived in 7 countries since I was 20.
Only 7?
Yeah, 7, lived and worked. Now it's normal for everyone to have lived and worked because we're such a globalized, but at that time there was no internet, you got a Lonely Planet book and your parents prayed that you'd come back. It was like the Bible, like, hey, everyone thought it was such a drastically scary thing to go, travel. I took 2 years off in my life and just traveled with a backpack. And scared the shit out of my dad. But he disowned me for 10 years because he said he can't participate in this craziness. And we found each other in the end, and it worked out well. But I got the opportunity to sort of my mom was killed by a drunk driver when I was 18. And that really defined my life. So I really, to escape the pain, I left America at 20 and I never returned to live. So I basically lived away.
So this is, I've read a tiny bit about you, and you have like a book and another one on the way.
Yeah.
And this is really the defining moment of your life, perhaps as an adult. What was it like before that?
I mean, I think like if you look at life and you just take it like a hero's journey, everyone has the thing that they had to overcome. And what I had to overcome was my mom's death on one hand and a really verbally abusive father who was chemically imbalanced and raged a lot. So if there's anything, I had to deal with these 2 competing, very loving mom that was killed. So basically at 18, I felt alone in the world. And like, death was like, wow, I just hope I could die so I could end this suffering. So when someone commits suicide, I have a lot of compassion because I know what it feels like to say, I'm not killing myself. I'm just ending suffering. So I said, fuck it. I said, if I'm going to suffer, then let's at least like experience what there is to experience in this life. And I took off and And I just did my traveling, and I went to Japan and learned Japanese, and then went to Switzerland, learned German. And so I did all these things that didn't apparently make any sense at all. You know, I learned how to play the saxophone. And I remember, like, you know, after learning how to do all of these things that appeared arbitrary, like my dad, you know, looked at me like, you're doing nothing with your life, you know, like your life is, you know, what are you doing? And then that was kind of when he disowned me, was like, you got to go live your own life and figure out what you want to do.
What did that mean, to disown you?
Disown me was, he said, you got 30 minutes to take everything you own out of my house. You're dead. You are out of my will. We do not talk anymore. That's it. That was disown. Yeah.
And that lasted for 10 years?
For 10 years, yeah. For 10 years.
And then what happened?
And then what happens is, when you go through a dramatic experience like that, you project onto the other person and you say, they're bad, they've done horrible things, and you rewrite scripts 100 times over so that you can feel justified in your resentment towards them. And I did that, like most would do, for a long time. And then I was sort of in my work. I was in a high level of a computer company, of all places, Vienna, Austria. And they just hired me because I spoke English and I was American. They figured, hey, he's got to be able to do marketing. And what happened was, I was coming to the end of my, say, 10 years there, and he called from a psychiatric ward. And I said, I'm not going to talk to him. Like, let him die. You know, that was it. Like, we've ended. I don't need to, because what happened is, if I'd speak to him, I was this big director, you know, and then if I spoke to him, I would regress back to this 13-year-old state of, you know, who am I, lose my self-confidence. And it might take me 6 months to recover from that. So I just said, no, let it go to voicemail. Yeah, I remember the secretary looking at me like, your dad's in a psychiatric. Yeah, let it go to voicemail. Of course, it didn't feel good, but I was actually taking care of myself at that time. And I think 3-4 months after that, I then said, hey, like, where am I going to start growing? And then I took on a mentor who was a Dutch person. And we had a lot of deep discussions. And at some point, I no longer looked outside of the world as a projection, but I just looked, the world is inside of me. And from that sort of understanding, I basically had this moment when he said to me, why did your dad do all of these things? And then I can cry now just talking about it. But I said, because he loved me. And then from that moment forward, it just changed forever, because I couldn't, the story that I had about him couldn't live anymore. It ended in that second. Everything he did, I understood from love and incapacity. And therefore, how could I even let any of those stories exist? So it was really like a clean slate in my brain. It was like, boom, now it's just a wholly another way of being. Yeah.
When was that? How many years ago?
That would have been, say 10, 15, maybe 15 years ago. And then we had reconciliation, and we spent 2-3 years together. And then he died of a heart attack. But when he died, we were very close. So it was like, there was no, he wasn't my dad anymore. You know, there wasn't this codependent, like, I'm not getting what I need from daddy, and now daddy is. It was like, oh, this guy's really incapable, and I loved him more for being incapable. So there was a bit of a weird kind of a shift from like him, me needing something from him, and him now needing something from me, which was love.
Yeah.
Which he didn't get a lot of in his life because of his behavior. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've used this now to positive effect to help other people?
I mean, yes, I do, but I'm not one to, I'm really pretty sarcastic, and I like life to be irreverent. So I think if you take the story and you hold it lightly, you kind of see yourself as a little bit independent, so you don't attach too much to the story, and you kind of embrace it, then you find some sort of beautiful balance where you do get a cry, you get to emote, you get to feel, but you see that isn't really you. That's just an emotion at that moment that comes up, and you get to embrace it, and then you get to go back to whatever just being. And I think the more serious you take it, the the more you get stuck because you think, oh, these are things I need to work out. And I've gotten over that. Like fuck working things out. Like they just are. They're just like, whatever my idea of yesterday was, it'll change tomorrow anyways. So it's always being rewritten day after day. So in some ways, what am I trying to make sense of? An idea that evolves, and it's always a prism. If I ask one person their interpretation, it'll be wholly different than my own. So I don't even trust my own interpretation of events anymore. It's just happening. And then apparently someone has attached meaning to it. So, yeah.
Yes. The Beatles were always good at rewriting their own past.
Yeah.
But I mean, to an extent, we all are.
Yeah. In fact, I had a great video. I'll send it to you afterwards. My friend is a huge Beatles fan, like absurd Beatles fan. So he has a child that's now 1.5, 2 years old, maybe. And basically, he has all the Beatles dolls lined up, and he has the daughter has to name each Beatle. So like she's almost pre-verbal, but she can name each Beatle if she points to each one.
So 30 years from now, she'll be seeing a shrink who doesn't know what the Beatles are.
Exactly.
Or maybe will.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Fun.
will. So what is the message that you want to share? You're mentoring people. You're writing books now. What's the message?
I mean, the message is it evolved so much. I did this trip. I drove a year and a half ago. I wrote this book. I didn't expect for it to do well. I wrote it on my iPhone.
It did well.
It did well. It did like beyond what I would have ever expected.
So brag about it.
Yeah. So I wrote a book that did well. Shocked me, by the way. Just like, okay, how do
you wrote a book and you made money?
Yeah, no. You never make money with a book. No, let's get that clear. But I mean, I sold close to 2,000 copies of books to people that I don't know. I mean, beyond my capacity to reason, like people that I don't know buying books, contacting me, saying what it meant to them. Like that's freaky. And that's, it's pretty much self-published. So you put something in the world, no payment of marketing or anything. And then it happens. So that was beyond anything I would have ever imagined. And it touched me. Even now, again, if I feel into it, I could cry again because there's just, you do not. It's like an artist. You paint the damn thing and you put it on a wall. You don't know how anyone's going to react to it. You didn't do it for their reaction. You did it as a healing for yourself and a sort of a beautiful expression. And at some age, I hope, earlier than later for people, that they don't give a shit anymore what people think of them. They just say, this is honestly who I am. And if it supports others, it's really, really beautiful. And if it doesn't, then, hey, obviously you weren't the one meant to have read that book. Right. So that did well. And then I was in this weird position because I'm like, okay, so now I've done something unexpected that has people. And I thought, okay, this is like, let's just take the serendipity nature of life. And then I just went home to my wife and said, I'm going to drive 3 months to the US and I'm going to do 60 sessions of sitting with people and saying, if you had one last chance to say whatever you felt to a person you loved and you knew they were going to die tomorrow, what would you write?
Wow.
And I did that 60 times in 3 months.
Where did you find the victims?
I kind of did this mix of, first I called up all my friends and I said, okay, I can draw a vague line that'll get me through America. If I start in Seattle, I'll drive down to sort of San Diego type area, and then I can drive across. And then the big issue was, do you drive across Texas across, or do you go up and drive through like Nebraska? So in general, like I had a little bit more connections in the Nebraska, the northern crossing, call it. So I did the northern crossing up to Boston, and then I did down to Miami. And so I did 10,000 miles, and I flew out, top left and the bottom right-hand corner, so to speak. And then I did bookstores, and then I did spiritual communities, and then I did old folks' homes. I mean, I was like, I really didn't want it to be, let me find one set of, like, this could be done anywhere. And I wanted to experience myself in each of those environments because it wasn't easy. I mean, I cried each session because the idea wasn't to facilitate others. Like there was none of this masturbatory act of, let me do an exercise with you and act like I have some elevated status over you. It was like, hey, like, this is honestly who I am. I left America 30 years ago to run away from this pain. So now 30 years later, I'm going to come and I'm going to live that pain so that you have a chance to feel what you need to feel so you can do what you need to do, whatever that is. And there was magical moments. I mean, really magical moments in that 3 month period.
who did people want to speak to?
It was all across the board. What shocked me was that, so the original intent was write to somebody, but I quickly learned that you can't impose too much structure on people because it shuts them down. So what I said was I said, if you resist, I said, it's often incredible to write to the person you resist most. I said, that's what I was doing. And I invited them to try it. And I said, and if you can't do that, write to the feeling that comes up, right? What's the feeling that you're just want to write to? So what was coming up, and a lot of people wrote to themselves. I mean, the hardest ones to listen to, I mean, even today, if I think again, it was really emotionally hard, were people when it was suicide. Because when there was suicide, people had a really hard time saying the thing that was like that they didn't get to say, and they felt some sense of guilt that they couldn't have done more. So that was always really hard to hear because you could see the pain in the people that would read the letters. But yeah, there was some really, I mean, one guy wrote a letter to divorce his wife. He was meeting her 20 minutes after the session. He says, I'm going to read you the letter. I'm going to give my wife to divorce.
Wow.
And one man was dying of cancer. He didn't live. He's since passed on, but he wrote a letter. And in those sessions, it was beautiful because in a way, people, especially in the middle of America, have a real hard time sharing and being with their emotion openly because they judge it. So in that way, by me crying, being fully present in my own pain, they kind of gave space for others like this man to share how hard it was for him to show his pain because he felt like it was a burden for others. So that's kind of that was the magic, I'd say, of the journey, was I got to sort of not really know what was going to happen, but just be present and let it emerge. And that's what I did 60 times over. Yeah.
Andy, you were writing to your dad over and over again?
No. I decided to write a letter each session. And I decided to write a letter. Basically, it started, if you write 60 letters, you're kind of like, you go through the first half session, I'm going to write this person, I'm going to write that. So you go through the first, and then I started to sit and I'm like, I don't know who to write to anymore. And it was like a conundrum. And then that was when I said, I'm not going to decide. And this is part of the exercise I gave people while I was doing it. I said, actually, if you don't know who to write, it's even better. I would say to the people, because what you write is you write dear, and whatever the word comes out after, like, don't think about it. Whatever comes out, you write the letter to that. And you got some just magical things written. Dear God, dear exhaustion, dear, like, so whatever the thing what they wrote, they just wrote to it. So it was this magical, eclectic sort of discovery that it didn't have a clear end in mind, but it was just the being together and sharing that moment was more than enough.
Wow. Yeah. So did this form the basis for your first book?
No, that was the first book. And this tour was the tour of that book, which was sort of, I used the book as an excuse to do the tour. The second book was a byproduct of that journey, because what I did was that I was experimenting. I was alone in a car for 3 months. It's not an easy time. You're driving 4 or 5 hours a day. You're going to a person you might not even know. You have to socially interact, and then you get in, do the session, and then get in the car again. So it was like each day this.
And your wife was okay with that? Like, I'm trying to think, if I said to my wife, I'm leaving for 3.5 months to get into a car and go, I don't even know where, and do I don't even know what.
I would say we don't have a codependent relationship. We love to be with each other. We absolutely love it. And even being together in COVID is like the best. Like, where everyone's complaining, like, I'm like, wow, like, it's incredible to spend more time together. Mm-hmm. So, but there's a part of our relationship that's always been, you live your dream and I live my dream. And we're here to explore what we can be and do.
And so it's always been like that?
Always been like that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's not easy. I mean, it wasn't easy for either of us, but, she made a decision to go to work in London, which I thought was the dumbest thing of all. But I was like, I kind of shared, hey, I think there's things that won't be easy. I did it very, not to undermine her, not to discourage her. And she did it. She was back in 9 months. So, I mean, it was, if I could have done it otherwise and just said, no, but no, I wasn't. I think that's, like, I would say that's real love. Love isn't the control. Love is I want you to experience and rise up to whatever it is you need to rise up to. So yeah, that's, and she laughingly has no interest in training. She has no interest in my books. She has never been to anything I've done. She hasn't even been to the last letter session. Like, she really is not interested at all in anything I do, which is just so, I find to be beautiful, you know?
That's quite incredible.
Yeah. And I think that's when, in some point, if you really need your partner to be different so that you're comfortable, like, that's not a relationship. That's you kind of like not making peace with who you are. And I did it. I mean, for years, I needed my wife to go to trainings that I was going to, thinking that it was going to help us improve our relationship. And she's not trying to participate. And I was blaming. And then, and actually, I wrote a chapter in the book to that moment when I realized that if I need her to change, I need to be out of the relationship. So I either love her for who she is or I end it now. Like, that was a big, big moment for me. And then I love when she struggled. It gave me so much joy. Like, I went from not wanting her to struggle to like laughingly saying, "Oh, that bitch, she needs to go through this shit to get wherever she needs to go to. I'm not wasting any more time trying to heal anybody, right? Everyone's got their own journey, you know."
That's quite incredible.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to prepare because you're going to interview me in 2 months.
What'd you say?
You're going to interview me in 2 months.
Exactly.
On your show. So I have to think about, or maybe you'll ask me other questions.
No, I'm going to talk to you about your sex life. I mean, that's all we'll do. We're very tongue in cheek on our side.
I tongue in cheek on sex life. That's, this is going straight to Facebook Live, and then it's going to YouTube.
I know. Are you kidding me?
It's going viral.
Who knows how many days we have left on this planet?
So how's your sex life?
My sex life, the older I'm getting, the less sexual drive I'm getting. So I'm noticing as I get older that there is not the I need to have sex every day sort of experience. Mm-hmm. So it's still good, but it's more like I'm tracking it. Everyone says you need to get your testosterone up because as your testosterone levels go down. And I also see I got to do more fitness because the more fitness I have, the more sexually active I get. So
it's gone from once a day to once every day and a half, I see.
Yeah, I would hope. Let's say not so much, but let's say we're tracking to at least once a week.
Once a week is probably, average according to studies.
Okay. Well,
when you've been married a decade or two.
Yeah.
So you can ask me about my sex life in October.
No, I think when I'm really interested,
and I will work on it in the beginning. From now, I have 2 months. I said, okay. Until I met you, it was once a month.
Now because of our talk.
I met Andy.
By the way, we've got on my show tomorrow, I've got Jane Elliott, who's famous for the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiment in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And you got to think to yourself, like, she's a very serious, she anyone who's interviewed her, she basically destroys them because you use one word incorrectly. It's like, bang, okay, now here we're going to go. Now you're going to get your lesson, Mm-hmm. the unconscious bias and all of this. So it'll be fun and interesting to see how she plays along, right? Obviously, we're not going to be asking those questions, obviously.
You can be totally improper with me, but you'll have to live with it afterwards.
No. With you, I'd be interested in the children's books, of course. That's what we'll discuss with you.
Okay. So tell me about the children and your life as a child and the children in your life and so on.
I mean, I don't have any children myself. So Ronnie and I have basically decided not to have kids, and it hasn't been a problem for either one of us. Not like, it's always weird when someone like has the presumption that you have kids and then judges that. It's always a bit foreign to us. Like,
I had the presumption that you didn't.
Okay.
But there's something very childlike about both of us.
Yeah.
So go there for a minute, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I love children, right? So there's none of this, oh my God, children are the worst. And I work, interestingly, with the nonprofits I'm doing, I work a lot with children. So I do work with, say, Start Soul, which is a program that's helping kids learn how to just to rediscover how they'd learn, right? Sort of shuffling, redefining what teaching is.
Oh, wow.
So Sugata Mitra, He did a TED speech. I don't know if you know Sugata, but so he, I've had contact with him through the years, and we've used his theory, and we've developed sort of the hub of that. So Seoul is what we've now put into the US. It's gone really well.
No, maybe I can pitch you my theory.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm sure we'd probably be all, I think everyone's sort of got the whole same story, like industrial revolution, getting a certain type of person we needed. That person went into a system that no longer existed. So the whole system sort of doesn't really exist, except we've got an educational industrial complex, like we had the military industrial complex, because now we got a system that's been set up to put people into positions that no longer exist. Exactly. And so how we navigate that is kind of like a discovery of what almost needs to collapse, because I've often seen systems exist because they need to sustain themselves. So what has to collapse so that something new can emerge? And, unfortunately, they often have to go to some pretty bad places before people realize something has to change here. Yeah.
So I'm going to send you my book.
Great.
On my theory, which is called hyphal learning.
Which is, say again?
Hyphal, like a fungus.
Okay. Oh, nice.
But I will talk about that in October.
I would like that. Yeah, that would be nice.
So here's another. So we have lots of points in common. We both studied saxophone. We love languages.
Yeah.
We love the Netherlands, and we're pained by education. I think that's the right word.
Yeah, pained.
We're in pain.
Yeah.
So what else do we have in common?
I love supporting things like mindfulness. So I do a lot of mindfulness. I mean, I do a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, right? But I almost don't even like to talk about it because it's so wow. As soon as you say entrepreneur, it's like persona, projection, ideas. Oh, let's talk about how to build a business. And like, yes.
And how to exit. Have you had many exits?
Yeah. We've had the exits as well. Yeah. Some positive, some negative, right? With the venture capital.
You've had some positive exits?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, of course. Are you kidding me? Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So what have you, so briefly, because a lot of my viewers are aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And all they've had is entrances.
Yeah.
They haven't had any exits. I had one exit. And how about yourself?
Well, I mean, so here's how it's worked for me, is that I had a guy on, Simon Squibb. He does entrepreneur. For those that are interested, his vision is to have 1 million entrepreneurs that are basically, and his whole theory was that luck was a skill, right? And he's brought a lot of businesses to a conclusion. And so, in one big one recently. So what I've seen is that basically I feel that you need to have this determination and a runway. And what I've seen in venture capital, which I've been more a part of in the failure of venture capital than the success of it for sure, is that people try to impose growth where there isn't necessarily the market timing for it. So we say, we're going to pump up growth with money. We're going to throw in money. We're going to hire sales. We're going to do the marketing. And then it's like this make or break. So we're going to expand. And then what happens is that when the market can't bear because we haven't created that, the market demand hasn't existed, it just collapses in on itself. So my experience has been the healthier is often this organic, letting it evolve, testing it and moving at a pace which incrementally gets created without this forced expansion. So if there's anything that I would say is if I'm talking to a founder of a company, and I've worked with founders, several who've been thrown out of their own companies. Like it's happened on several occasions. Yes.
Me.
So as soon as somebody from the outside says you're not growing, you're not expanding, you're not, and then you start to take their strategy over your own, you've already lost your business. Yeah. Because in some ways, I see vision as if you can't manage your own vision, then basically you're not running the show anyways. An idea that isn't yours is now commanded you, and you're basically just like out of control. There's no connection of this is what feels good, this is what sounds good, this is where I go. So if let's say if I have, and I work with CEOs quite often, if they tell me this is their vision, I will not push them further in their vision. because I'll say this is what they can bear at this moment with the complexity that they're dealing with, whatever's going on around them. And then in time, you'll see, okay, I freed myself up. I've dealt with a few fires. Now I can relook at the world and see. And I see whenever you try to expand over a person's ability to hold a vision, you meddle in their affairs.
And where were you 20 years ago when I needed you? Well, I got fired from running my own startup.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to buy back the shares in order not to go bankrupt.
Yep.
That was a real oy vey lesson in my life. And now I'm doing exactly what you say. We have a startup, a self-publishing company.
Yeah.
And it's growing at the pace that it can grow.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
Isn't it?
It's like, I have a pineapple growing in my backyard. It takes 2.5 years to grow a pineapple. Did you know that?
No.
Okay. So now you know. If you lived in Israel, maybe you'd know.
Yeah.
And you wait a year and say, where's my pineapple? You wait another year. And finally, there's a fucking pineapple. I don't know if it's an edible pineapple, but it's growing. Now, yes. If the plant would say, it would say exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Which is you can't rush a pineapple.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do, you actually don't necessarily know that, like, you're not basing it on the conditions because you're trying to create conditions that don't exist. And there's a balance in there. Yes, great companies pushed and created markets that didn't exist. So that is also true. You can't say, hey, great things were created because the limits of their environment. Oftentimes they change the environment. Squibb, the man I mentioned, talked about Ford. He paid his employees more so that they could afford to buy their cars. And so in that way, he changed the environment to be able to expand his business. So it's not that simple. And yet there's also an aspect of Ford was able to vision that out. So in some ways, the fact that he did have that vision, or you never know, people often they often write it about after they've succeeded. They make it look like they understood a lot more than they actually did. But like, let's say, for instance, that he did, then that would have been within the realm of what he was actually trying to achieve. Yeah.
What's the name of that Danish philosopher? Kierkegaard.
I don't know.
Who said that we always tell our life backwards.
Yes. We always tell it.
Unfortunately, we have to live it forwards.
Yes, unfortunately, we have to live. And I had this.
What's the name?
Kierkegaard. I had a
Norwegian, Danish.
I had a great talk with. I mentioned it on my own show about this. I was with an economist from Innsbruck having dinner, and he was doing a study, and I can't remember. It was about a false positive, but he said in World War II, the airplane bombers went out and they got shot up. And when the airplane bombers came back, they basically saw where the bullets were, and then they put armor over where those bullets hit. And the humor is he said, so everyone that writes books in business are the people that made it back. And then we assume that. But the truth be told is the ones that got hit and didn't make it back, that's where you needed to protect them. So basically everywhere that it got hit and it still stayed afloat, you didn't need to put armor there because we knew that it could withstand that. So
the next book is to go through the states and to interview failed people.
Well, basically, that is the second book, actually, because the second book comes out at the end of August. It's called The Wounded Healer. Mm-hmm. And it was my journey of those 3 months. And what I did an experiment with sort of a tool I've used from a man named Peter Koenig, who was on my show yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I saw him.
Yeah. And so Peter has his tool, which is
the money expert.
The money expert. Yeah. And what I did is I played with his tool, which was I am the thing I resist most, and it's fucking great. So if I am abused as a child, I was abused as a child, and it's fucking great. And there's this radical self-love aspect to life. Like if you love the shit out of everything that blocks you, you free up so much you can't even imagine, because that thought no longer is inhibited. It's no longer wreaking havoc in the back of your brain. So if you can celebrate the things that you resist, it's the paradox of life. It's like, oh, now I'm free.
Andy, that's no fun for a Jew.
Because why? Your life is only suffering?
Yeah. What's life without the guilt and the suffering? Tell me.
Exactly. You know, it was worse because I had a mom. My mom was Catholic and my dad was Jewish. So each one had their own brand of manipulation and guilting. And I have to say that, like, although I went to Catholic school and I did that, I was far closer to the Jews, because the Jews, you could say, go screw yourself. And then you'd actually make up the next. You don't even need to make up. It was just like, we can fully be expressed. If you did that on the Catholic side of the family, you wouldn't speak for a few years. So there was a lot more of this, you know, I can be free in who I am. You can be free in who you are. And we can still get along together. So that suited a little bit of my own personality. That's for sure.
It's wonderful, because a lot of what you're saying is, I don't know anything about the Christianity. Having grown up in a household where we weren't allowed, to go to a church or to know anything about. My sister would escape from the house to help the neighbors build the Christmas tree without anybody knowing about it.
Yeah.
For 40 years.
Wow.
But in Christianity, correct me if I'm right. There's this whole thing of forgiveness. And very often when I'm talking to somebody and to somebody who's not Jewish, and they're bitter about something, and I'm forgiving, and I say, hey, I don't want to be the Christian in this discussion.
I would say that's an urban myth you've heard. I don't think that's real.
Okay. Tell me about it.
I think it's like,
so Jesus didn't forgive?
I mean, like if you look at America today and you see the hypocrisy of the evangelical Christians in the U.S., it's like, I mean, at this moment in time, it's, I spend a lot of time, the thing I enjoy about how I live is that on one level, I'm taking all this shit seriously. And on another level, I couldn't give a fuck. So, and those two live equally, like they're equally all the time, really equally. Like, I'm like, oh, and so the part of me that can't give a fuck is the part of me that's really conscious that there's an identity that exists. I attach to things. I want outcomes. I get stuck if I think that I actually am not being seen or heard. And so that identity is really always sort of allowed to be seen a lot. It happens more. You're never not identified. People want to say, hey, you can go to this enlightened space where there's no identity. That's another identity, obviously. But for the moment, let's just stay with the less identified seeing this. And what I see is that in America, especially, of course, at the moment, is that the more identified the individual becomes in I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal or whatever it is that they project onto themselves, basically there's no space there for any sort of seeing of oneself, because you're just a reaction to the environment you're in. And so when we talk about religion, or we talk about any indoctrination of any sort, where either person gravitates towards it because they desire it, or they're because of schooling or family or whatever it is, that in some weird way, as soon as we begin, we don't see how we are influenced by our environment, then we are, just say, and no different than just some animal that reacts to its environment because it's been trained to pattern over and over. Although we love to think we're really intelligent. We love to believe that we're this highly developed, where actually, it's like if you did the ringing of the bell, the water is going to, the mouth is going to water. So, yeah.
Show me a good Jewish boy that grows up and then decides to become a Zen Buddhist out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. I saw it happen. But it's a rare event, right?
Yeah. Funny. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the living between those two spaces of really caring and being fully present and not giving a shit. Like, I find that that's a very, very important, strong kind of space to experience. The paradox of life is that on one level, I'm fully in it, and on another level, I see through it. If you can't live both simultaneously and feel the tension in that, then somehow you get stuck in one or the other. Because I also see people that go into this space of like, I am one with everything, separating, and then they're emotionally shut down. So they actually don't really experience life because they're so in their heads that they think they've rationalized it away. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I have a theory.
What's that?
It's called the banana factor.
Okay.
And I want you either to support it or destroy it.
Okay.
You can do either.
I can already tell you. There's just funny thing. There's always a context where wherever you say is true and wherever you say is not true.
Of course.
So for me, it doesn't really matter what you say. It's just how do I decide to interpret it. But
I always use bananas as metaphor.
Yeah, beautiful.
There's this song called Na Na Banana Na Na Banana, and when I teach success to my college students and interview people who have been very successful, or very, even I would say, successful according to their own definition, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I find that when you probe them and prod them, they have a nana banana in their childhood. Okay. Somebody that they had to prove something to, a tormentor that they had to become an adult and say, "Na na banana, you thought I was a shit, and I sure showed you." So
I do a lot of hiring. So I always say when we're in sales, we want to hire someone with a mommy daddy issue, because if they got a mommy daddy issue, they're always got to prove themselves quarter after quarter after quarter, and they're never going to be good enough. So yes, I completely know the nana banana, and I don't necessarily see the nana banana as, for instance, ideal in all roles per se, but I do see, like, if you have a sales role, and sales is all about proving yourself over and over, and you're only as good as your last quarter, and you want the recognition because you didn't get it as a child. So now I need. So yes, I can very much identify with it, but I don't know. I would say I like to see behavior role specific. So I'd say I love the nana banana in certain roles, and I don't like the nana banana in other roles, because, a nana banana in a leadership role can be problematic, because in some ways, if they need the recognition from people underneath them, like maybe Trump, then in some ways that behavior will not necessarily have the best outcomes at times. That's the
in that case, it's good that I'm not a CEO. I almost said it's good that I'm not Prime Minister of Israel, but anybody could be Prime Minister of Israel and do a better job than whatever his name is. But we don't talk politics on my show.
That's good. I did see a lot of politics coming out of Israel lately on my feed. So I know something big happened, but I can't actually tell you what. I think someone was thrown in prison or something. That's what I got, but I didn't quite understand it. But we don't need to talk about it.
Not yet, certainly.
Oh, okay.
No, the Prime Minister's been he has to go to court.
Oh, okay.
But let's talk about more exciting things.
Yes.
So we're close to the end of this wonderful interview, and I hope there'll be more. What haven't we talked about, Andy?
What have we not talked about?
I know what we didn't talk about.
What's that?
And I'll tell you what we didn't talk about, and then you'll tell me what we didn't talk about. Mm-hmm. So you said something that was really outstanding, and I made a mental note, and then of course I forgot it. Now it just came back to me.
It's my life.
Whose life?
I do the same. In fact, if I interrupt you again, you won't remember it. That's how my life is. Like, who cares?
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Wait. Okay. So here it is. The defining moment in my own personal, I also had a shitty life as a child. We can talk about. Was the realization after about 2 years of cognitive therapy that I had to kill my parents.
Mm.
And I said to my psychologist, I said, what you're saying to me is that I have to kill my parents. And she says, yeah. I said, no, you don't get it. I have to kill my parents. And she said, oh yeah. The vision that I have of my parents ever being what I want them to be ain't gonna happen. I have to kill those parents in order to get the ones that I have.
Yep.
And that's what I did in my life. I killed the parents I would never have in order to have the ones that I ended up having.
Yeah. And I think if one doesn't do that, it's, you create the codependency, and that codependency just defines you the rest of your life, because in some ways we weirdly, because we've been programmed that way, think the parent is there to serve us, as opposed to they're just another person in the world who's screwed up and hasn't quite figured it out. So if you can't shift your state of mind to, and there's a maturity in there, and there's also a self-assurance, like I can give the love that I needed from them to myself. Like, that's not an easy gift to give yourself. Yeah. Love, like almost wow, I feel real compassion for the little kid who was so unseen and so on as a kid.
Yeah. That was like an incredible moment that you just brought back. Now I'm on the brink of tears.
Yeah.
But certainly so important. And why the hell did it take me 40 years to realize that?
I don't, you know what, you say 40 years. I don't think most people ever get there. So you say it took you that long. And I would say, what percentage of people, like I was working with a client 2 weeks ago, and they called me up and they said, Andy, my brother's put in the psychiatric ward. I'm this, my dad has been diagnosed with this. And I said, why the fuck are we talking? Like, why are you wasting my shit? Why are you wasting my time with this shit? And I love this man. So there's love in this. Like, why are you wasting my time with this shit? Because you know what you've done? You've just absorbed everything of their incapacity and brought it into your own life again and again and again. You suffer. You're going to get a divorce. You're going to lose the kids. You're actually screwing up your entire life because you think that these people are going to give you something that they can never give you. So how do I help you see through the fact that these people, in your words, are dead? They are dead. And once they're dead, you can revisit them and decide whatever they mean to you. But if you don't foresee them as dead, you will be confused and screwed up the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's when my parents actually came to life in my life.
Yeah.
It's when I killed the ones that I wanted.
The ones that I wanted. Yeah. It's the best. But you can't say that to somebody who's in the suffering, because they need that suffering, because that's what they're longing for. It's that childhood need, unseen, and they just long and need. And and I don't, I'm not a coach and not a mentor, like I've done no skills based. I haven't done like no training, basically zero. So like I don't come from the world of, hey, I've done this. And I send people to other people all the time, because I do realize there's an enlightenment, and I don't say enlightenment in the big E. I say where you get free of your own identity more and more. There's a heart opening enlightenment, and then there's like stuck in your body, like things that you can't. And each one of them kind of is important in its own way. So I don't really even see me or anyone per se as having all of this. It's like each person supports an individual on their journey in the way that serves that person, right? So, yeah.
Okay, and for the end of our wonderful dialogue here, what haven't we talked about?
I would say that we haven't talked about how coronavirus is a beautiful thing. It's given us an opportunity to completely think new about everything we thought we knew. It forced things on us that we would have otherwise maybe not have to done or considered. And now we have the opportunity to take that big fat fucking mirror that's in our face and look into it deep and say, what is this teaching me about myself, about the universe, about our education systems, about our economies? Like the whole thing gives us an opportunity to just totally re-see the world. Because what I know is anything patterns, they get so ingrained that we don't even know that we are pattern beings. So a pattern break like this is a wonderful chance to rediscover yourself in ways you might not have known it before.
Yeah, I agree more than you know. But at my age, the trick is dodging the bullets right now.
I hear you. Hallelujah. Yeah.
I'm going into work and I see somebody say, no. Like a year ago, I would have gone over and hugged them, kissed them.
Yes. Yeah.
And I said, no, don't come near me.
Don't come near me.
You're breathing in my direction. Yes. Breathe somewhere else.
What is that, Monty Python? I fart in your general direction.
Yeah, exactly. So, Andy, this has been terrific.
Yeah, it was great.
With Andy Chaleff. And I can't wait until
yeah, we're together on my end. We'll do the show. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun.
I might even invite you back someday, but
please. It's always fun.
You'll have to have a different color of green screen.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out how to do that on Zoom. I use a different technology on my side. Yeah.
So tomorrow I'll show you.
Okay, great. Except you look really funny. Whenever you move, you're like a blob-like thing going on. It doesn't have like a crisp line around your head.
I'll tell you why. Because I'm wearing these because there's noise outside.
Oh, okay.
So if I take this off,
Oh yeah, that's a bit better.
Yes, of course it's better, but then you can hear the tractors outside.
Yeah. I can't hear them, by the way, just in case I don't know if you actually did change anything, but I don't hear the tractors now.
Well, let's say that they were noisier
before. Thank you, Mel.
Okay, thank you. It's been great.
Great. I look forward to seeing you on my end. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah.